On today's show, we welcome Pastor Neale Bacon. Welcome to Magic Mike's Castle webcast and podcast. And welcome back, everybody, to Magic Mike's Castle. We have a very special guest on today's show, Pastor Neale Bacon. How are you, Neale?
We're doing good.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on today's show. Now, I was excited. I'd heard of you before some time ago, and we briefly met at one of the magic meetings several months ago. But what excites me, one of the many things that excites me about what you do is ventriloquism. And I've only known a couple of ventriloquists in my life, living out east and relocating here back in '94. And to me, it's whimsical and it's pure magic. Even as an adult, I still think there's something very engaging and exciting about seeing, we call them vent dolls, ventriloquist dolls, but people out there, regular people, may call them puppets or whatever they want to call it. So I'll speak as if I were a layperson. When you see these incredible puppets, and it's like watching a Disney show. It opens up a whole world of excitement and imagination, not just for kids, but for adults. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to have you on as a ventriloquist and magician. And the other aspect, which we don't see often enough, is you're a gospel magician and ventriloquist as well. And people will either understand this terminology or they won't. Briefly, for those who don't, I'd love you to share what the term gospel magician and ventriloquist means.
Well, simply, it's I use gospel illusions because some churches still freak out at the word magic. I do gospel illusions and I use my puppets. We share the same kind of stories or the same kind of messages, but people tend to listen more that it's coming from a puppet. When I first started doing the ministry stuff, I used to go out to, it's called Miracle Valley. It used to be a treatment center Salvation Army had out in Mission. And I would just do a regular message. And my partner that I went out with said, why don't you bring the puppets out? And I said, this is 150 guys in rehab. They really don't want the Muppet show. He said, trust me, I think it'll work with these guys. Well, the next time I went out, I brought out my dummy and unbelievable results. Everybody wanted to talk to me afterwards and whatnot. And basically after that, I wasn't allowed to go out there if I didn't bring the puppet. It's a message that people have heard before in Sunday school or church or, if you've been in treatment or whatever, but it's a whole new way of hearing it. I was raised to believe the 11th commandment was thou shalt not laugh, especially in church. And for a lot of guys, it was really funny. You could tell how strict the church was they may have been raised in, because they'd laugh and then they'd stop themselves. Like, you're not supposed to do that. And I said, you know what? God created joy. God created laughter. So why wouldn't we laugh in church?
Exactly. I'm so excited as well because, without going on too much, because my full title is Reverend Dr. Michael Leike, everybody needs, especially today, but for all time, inspiration. They need messages. They need something more. Not everybody. A lot of people naturally believe, and they've done their own research, and it's either biblical texts or other references. But a lot of people, they don't have something. I don't want to call it faith, but something to believe in, to really know that there's something more than just this black and white. And it, and so thankfully you go out there in a very pleasing way, in a way that's aesthetically funny and visual, to at least share messages of inspiration with others. So at least that's there as an educational reference point for others as well.
A lot of people, when they hear puppets in church, they're automatically, oh, that's kids ministry, and then they
Yes.
shove them in the basement of Sunday school. But I have done seniors homes, I've done treatment centers, I've done camps, I've just done full on. There was a church on Vancouver Island was having their anniversary, and so I did that, and I did the Sunday morning message. But then Saturday night they had a fun night, and so we had the puppets and the magic, you know. So it's all rules together.
Absolutely. Very exciting. We're going to pause for a brief break, and when we return, we'll learn a little bit more about Pastor Neale Bacon. We'll see you all in a minute.
Producer and host of his specials on social media based on his magical books of the same name, Dr. Michael, Magic Mike Likey, is also a clinical hypnotherapist and doctor of theocentric psychology. Having performed more than 250 shows a year in the mid-80s and 90s, he also produced and starred in the world's longest regularly produced TV shows in Winnipeg, Canada for 9 years, and guested regularly on broadcast television and starred in A Medieval Feast for 10 years. Star of stage and television, Magic Mike Likey performs illusions large and small and will teach you the secrets of the magical arts, both in person and virtually. This is Magic Mike Likey.
And we're back, and I'm so glad, honored, and happy to have Pastor Neale here today. Neale, what were your beginnings? Who inspired you? Where did you start with ventriloquism?
Well, in a couple of ways. One, from being, little person. Well, younger, I don't know if I was little. But anyway, I was a fan of the Muppets. And if they were on Ed Sullivan, I got to stay up to see when they were on, or Topo Gigio. And I don't know how many people know, but the woman who created Topo Gigio just passed away, actually, just recently. She was like 90-something. But locally, for those who live in the Lower Mainland, will remember Peter Ralston. And Peter had a show on the old BCTV. It's called Pete's Place. And it ran 1965 to 1979, I want to say, somewhere there. Quite a long run. Won a couple of what they used to call the ACTRA Awards, which is like Canada's version of an Emmy, as Best Children's Show. Absolutely amazing show, but back in those days, you could write into the show, and it was like the peanut gallery. You could go and Peter would invite you to bring your family and watch them do the show. Now, the shows were done live. There were no taping. And so I went, my mom and dad put me down. And I do remember we were observing from a production booth overhead. And I was 5 or 6, just curious. I wanted to know what was streaked down below me. So I went to look, and unfortunately there's a big window here. And I hit this with my head, and it reverberated throughout the soundstage. And Peter was in the middle of doing something, and his show was set outdoors, like he visited him at this little cabin out in the woods. And he stopped what he was doing, looked up and went, "Thunder," and then just kept going. He never missed a beat. Peter did things like we used to have Tina the Elephant here at the Vancouver Game Park. And they brought her out to the show, and then they realized they couldn't get her in the building. She wouldn't get to the big truck door. So he borrowed a new camera from the news department and went outside to film, but this new news camera was colored. And Peter's show was in black and white. So it was black and white, and then it was colored, and then it was black and white. So, anything went. Peter was a master at learning to roll with the punches. So I met him when I was like 6, and then when I was about 20, he was performing at the old Pacific Center downtown, and reintroduced myself, and Peter, I'm fortunate to say, became my mentor and a good friend for a long time. His daughter, Karsha, and I fought to get Peter recognized in the Entertainment Hall of Fame in Vancouver. As a pioneer in children's stuff. Every local market had one of those. Back in the 60s, we were always that local guy. Peter was ours. And he was very famous on the west of Canada, probably BC and Alberta. He did every fair, he did hospital openings, he did schools, all that stuff. And but to watch his show regularly, I was fascinated when my two favorite characters on his show were these two guys named Grumpy and Doofle, and they lived in a well, the rewind, but they were based on the Honeymoon. He's based on Jackie Gleason and Art Carney. These are two guys who always had these money-making schemes that never worked, right? And they had the same personality as Jackie Gleason and Art Carney. And when Peter passed away, Barbara called me and said, well, I got a whole trunk full of puppets here that we want to sell. We're keeping the figures, but we're going to sell all these puppets. And I said, well, I'll try and sell some through the Vancouver Magic Circle. And I went to Barbara's house, brought this big trunk of puppets home, and I'm looking through them, and lo and behold, Grumpy and Doofle are in this trunk. So I bought those two, and I was tap dancing saying, Grumpy and Doofle live at my house. Well, after a year or so, I go to a convention every year down in Kentucky, the International Ventriloquist Convention. And the convention is held to pay for the museum. It's the only ventriloquism museum in the world, in a place called Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. And I thought, you know what? We all knew about Canada, or about Peter in Canada, but the Americans didn't know. And so I wrote up a big biography and whatnot, and donated the two puppets and some photographs, which are now they're on display in the museum, talking about Peter and his impact in generations. If it wasn't for Peter, I probably wouldn't be a ventriloquist.
How exciting is it to have a career that brings joy, laughter, amazement to kids and adults? We're so fortunate to have you here today, Neale. We're going to take another brief break and we'll be back. Hopefully Neale will share a little something with us when we come back right after this.
Enjoy Magic Mike Likey's animated cartoons, comic books, CDs, and DVDs available from Amazon. He is also the author of more than 45 self-help alternative wellness books, as well as instructional magic books, all available from Amazon. Published in International Magicians trade journals, Magic Mike Likey is a member of the International Brotherhood of Magicians and the Society of American Magicians.
And we're back with our exciting gospel ventriloquist and magician, Pastor Neale Bacon. And Neale has brought along a friend of his. Let's meet somebody. Who is this person, Neale?
This is Captain Christian. Hello, citizen. I bought him at the last ventriloquist convention I went to. The International Ventriloquist Society had a table. We have a dealer's room like magic conventions, and they had puppets people were selling. You know, Mark Wade, who I think everybody listening knows Mark, had this one made. He was doing a series in schools on good character. And so this guy, originally, you see the CC on him, he was Captain Character.
Very good.
Well, Mark was selling him off, and as soon as I saw that CC, I went, Captain Christian. Now, what we do with Captain Christian, no, I wasn't talking to you, I was talking about you. Oh, that's true. I don't. In terms of using him with Bible messages, we talk a lot about the heroes in the Bible. And with kids, what a lot of children don't realize that they might know the story of, like David and Goliath, which is one of our favorites. They don't realize how young these people were. And David was on 12 or 13 or whatever, depending on who you read on. But they were all young people. And so I can tell them that if I'm dealing with the really little kids, I can say they're not much older than you. And if they're older kids, I can say, well, he was about your age. And that really draws them into the story, because it's not just about a bunch of grown-ups doing brave stuff. And in his case, he thinks you have to look this way to be a hero. You have to have the cape, you have to have the suit, and the whole bit. And I try to explain to him that heroes in the Bible didn't have that stuff. In fact, a big part of our routine about David and Goliath is he wants to play David because he wants to be the hero. That's his job. And we explain that, we describe Goliath, 9 feet tall, has a big spear. I don't like him. Yeah. We describe it, and then I tell him that he's got 5 smooth stones and a slingshot. And his general answer is, I'm going to die. No. I said, so David went after him with a bazooka. No, he didn't have a bazooka. He didn't? No. So anyway, David went after him with a machine gun. No, he didn't have a machine gun. He didn't. No. He had the 5 smooth stones. He's got a spear and a shield. Right. And I got 5 rocks. Right. I'm going to die. No. And so that we find humor in that situation when he suddenly realizes he's in over his head. And when I said, he slung the rock and he hit Goliath right in the forehead. Kazing! What was that? Sound effect. We don't need sound effect. Okay. Anyway, he threw the rock. Kazing! Do not say kazing again. Okay, perfect. So he threw the rock, and so it just goes like this, that he learns at the end that you don't have to dress up like this to be a hero. Now, Jeff Dunham, I'm going to put the captain down here for a second. Jeff Dunham very graciously, Jeff had a character he used for a while called Melvin the Superhero with No Particular Powers. And it turned out to be the same thing. He just wanted to wear the suit. And Jeff had some really good superhero type jokes. And he's never used Melvin again. I've never seen him in any other special. So I spoke to Jeff and I said, can I use some of those? And he goes, well, they weren't original to me. Help yourself. And so when I'm describing him as a hero, and I ask him, like, what powers do you have? What do you mean? I said, well, like, can you fly? Well, that depends. On what? How far can you throw me? Can you stop a bullet? Once. And then I said, okay, well, you don't sound like you have too many powers. What about your weaknesses? What's your weaknesses? Donuts. Really, what do donuts do? They make me fat. Then I can't get off the ground.
I love it. I love it. What a whimsical and colorful way to share messages, to give insight and inspiration to family audiences, Neale. How can people get in touch with you if they want to book you for a show?
They can get a hold of me. Oh, this is, by the way, this is Mrs. Grace Goodhart. Oh, hello, dear.
I love her glasses. How can they get in touch with you?
Goodhart. Through my website. Hang on one second. It's time for my nap. Yes, it is. Which is www.gospelventguy.com.
Excellent. That'll be at the bottom of the screen when this finally airs. And I want to thank you so much. There's never enough time for these shows. I want to thank you so much, Pastor Neale Bacon, for joining us this day.
Well, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank all of you out there for watching. Take care. We'll see you all really soon.